What's up guys, Rob the Awesome here, and today I'm spreading out the new class and weapon changes that the Tough Break update has brought to the table and explaining the goods and the bads about each and every one of them. Let's go! If you only want to know about a certain class or a certain set of weapons, you can click on one of the annotations listed and choose the class you want to jump to. Or you can watch the entire thing. You might learn something new. You ready? Alright. Here we go! So in order to get the full value of the list, we need to understand some of the buffs and nerfs added to TF2 as a whole, so that we can later add those stats onto later weapons. Valve has changed the base weapon switch speed from 0.67 seconds to 0.5, meaning that every weapon now has improved switch speed. Hooray! You can now see friendly outlines of players, which is good for communication between players but not quite for this list, and they even updated various weapon descriptions to better detail what they do. I don't believe that. So when I opened the game and I immediately looked at the shortstop, all the hidden stats were not there. They lied to us! Basically, the only thing we're taking from all this is the weapon switch speed, something very important to note for later, but I'm gonna add something. We have to remember that these buffs and nerfs are regarding matchmaking coming eventually. Every balance they make is so that people will add variety with the weapons they choose for matchmaking. We need to take off our pub goggles and view it in the eyes of competitive. There we can see how valid these buffs and nerfs really are. Let's start the list off with the multi-class weapons. The panic attack got a small buff that allows you to keep all your ammo contained until you release the shoot button. This is pretty neat buff as it somewhat makes the gun not that trashy anymore. It's good to keep the burst whenever you want, and as long as you track, this is a pretty good weapon. The negatives to this effect, however, is that if you misfire, the time it takes to shoot all the bullets and reload back up gives the enemy enough time to kill you off. So it's not exactly viable to always hold your bullets, but it gives a neat little option in combination with the fast reload on low health and the spread at high health. It is a high learning curve, but the extra little tidbit makes it so that you can always keep somewhat of an edge with a timed hit scan. It's a neat little balance change, and I love it. The reserve shooter no longer boosts all around switch speed, but instead buffs the switch to speed by 5% and keeps the switch from speed the same. That's nice. It can no longer mini-crit jumping targets, however, meaning that the crits you get are well deserved. You can still crit hit soldiers while they're rocket jumping, but it keeps the scout game clear as this weapon was just used to abolish scouts off the face of the earth if they decide to jump. It gives flank classes more of a chance while well deserving those nice crits. Again, a nice balance change. The half Satoshi now has longer melee range and holster time on and off. I'll explain that a little more when we hit the Demoman stage of the list, but for now, we're just going to keep going. The honor bound is now changed so you take 50 damage if you decide to switch out without the proper kill. It makes for a great strategy and competitive to build Uber, while all in all making this weapon seem viable to have. Having the weapon non-stop until you killed someone just seemed like a blue ball for most demos and soldiers, and to make that fair, you only gain half your life back instead of 100% of it. And with the addition of no random crits, the health back is well deserved. It's a nice change of pace. Those random crits were brutal, and receiving 100% health from random crits seemed like bullcrap. Now, it's fair and balanced. Now that that's out of the way, let's focus on the Scout. The Scout got a lot of interesting buffs to some of his unused weapons. I guess Valve really wants Scouts to use something other than stock stuff for a change, so that's pretty nice. They updated the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol to have plus 5 health on hit rather than the original plus 3. I see that as a pretty neat thing, since 3 health really isn't enough to sustain a Scout's health, especially when it's slow as balls to fire. I see this as a great defensive tool when running away, but a majority of Scouts want to be aggressive behind the flank, so they can just run to the nearest health pack if they want to get heals. No fall damage is nice, but the fire rate is slow and damage vulnerability just isn't going to cut it. No extra health on hit is going to save you from up and close action that the Scout needs to sustain. Luckily enough though, this only affects the Scout when he has the weapon out, so all these negatives only matter if you constantly keep pulling it out. It's good or bad depending on how you use it, meaning that this weapon is balanced. Next, we have the Mad Milk buff that decreases the cooldown rate by 20% when extinguishing flames from teammates. That's nice. Now I have a reason not to watch my medic burn in flames. Don't want to waste my milk for that. This buff really encourages the Scout to be more of a team player, and most of the time they're just out and about doing their own thing. It's a cute little add-on to the weapon, and I think it's well needed. And lastly, we have the Rap Assassin that batted our way into our hearts and made us bleed. It got awesome buffs that makes the ball have a blast damage radius, a faster ball charge rate by 25%, and a damage penalty reduced by 5%. This is actually pretty awesome, since if there is a group of enemies clumped together, you don't have to be accurate with it anymore. though the bleeding only happens if you hit them directly. Compared to the Sandman before, the ornament really didn't do much compared to stunning a player, so adding the recharge time really did make it balanced, and I mean, it does make sense for an ornament to shatter all over the place. So that's a nice touch. I'd say they really made it tough to choose between the Sandman and the Rap Assassin with these buffs. I'd say this was properly balanced. Glad to see the Scout getting some of his lesser used weapons buffed. Now we can see some variety and strategy with the Scout's arsenal. Now, let's focus on the Soldier's changes. The Beggar's Bazooka got a nerf, thank God, that reduced its blast radius by 20%. Wow, the Soldiers must be having a field day if these are the nerfs. I mean, come on, what soldier is using this weapon to do blast damage? When someone uses the Beggars, they mainly aim for direct hits, which is what a majority of people were already doing. I guess this is precaution, but it's still not going to change how Beggar soldiers play. The radius was only added to stop soldiers from playing back with this weapon, but because of the 3 rocket blast, I think people got the message. I don't usually see a lot of people use this weapon from too far away, so this wasn't really needed that much. I mean, the negatives of not getting ammo from dispensers doesn't matter with the soldier's high mobility to find ammo packs, or hell, switch to secondary near a dispenser to get your primary ammo back. The rockets going every which way doesn't matter if you know how to bomb the hell out of someone up close, and who's going to load more than 3 rockets in the chamber? This weapon would be fine if you didn't have complete control over how many rockets you could fire, and when. It needs a little reworking, maybe a tiny damage penalty, or slower rockets the more rockets you fire. Regardless, I think nothing has been truly changed to make this less of a threat, and the rocket jumping with this weapon is insane. It may take a bit of a learning curve, but not that much to see that this is still one beast of a weapon. Next we have the Conch that gives the soldier a crit heal system. Instead of healing 2 health a second constantly, you can now heal up to 4 health following the crit heal rule. The less you get hit, or inflict damage to self, like rocket jumping, the more health you gain. Really balanced in my mind, since constantly having 2 HP regen was keeping the soldier alive a lot more. And now following a crit heal system makes it so that you'll have to play a strong ground game if you want to get the heals. It really feels like you earn that Conch now. I say that it teaches the soldier to sustain himself, and if he doesn't apply those rules, then he can just get less healing. You can say that this doesn't really give incentive to want to use the other backpacks, but it's all situational. Getting health back on damage and a little bit of speed may not be as good as a defensive buff against sentries. It all depends on what you need. And the buff to self is no longer the obvious choice when compared to possibly getting 20 more health. Or... wow. The buff banner really needs a buff. It just feels like a banner right now. I think the crit heal system properly makes this weapon balanced. The parachute only got affixed with fire and whatnot and staying up in the air. No more ghost strats, I suppose. Speaking of ghost strats, the Market Gardener got a nerf of 20% less attack speed. Oh my god, that's so terrible! You can no longer swing the Market Gardener like a madman! Seriously though, remember that switch speed I mentioned earlier? Apply that with the Market Gardener? That's basically a buff in itself. This doesn't change market gardening whatsoever. In fact, it's even faster, so it's a little bit of a change, but not really. It only affects attack speed, not swing speed. It teaches soldiers that you really shouldn't be going in all willy-nilly with swinging your melee at someone, but this nerf is so tiny that it's non-existent. Again, soldiers, you must be having a field day with these nerfs, but again, the swing speed makes it so that it's not just a stock shovel with added buffs. It is indeed balanced. Last but not least, the airstrike got a buff of minus 20% blast radius when rocket jumping. Looks like you won't be getting the huge height nor the distance with this weapon anymore. Since you can no longer cover huge areas of the map from the ground anymore, you'll need to be getting height advantage first in order to be doing what you were doing before. Not bad. Mix in all the weapon's previous stats of rocket jumping damage reduced, the blast radius making it an airborne direct hit, and the need for the base jumper makes this weapon overall balanced. Damn soldiers, getting all the good stuff. But not to worry, the snipers got some pretty neat stuff this Christmas that adds in different techniques for the sniper's gameplay. Check it out. The Cleaner's Carbine now has a Crikey meter that can be activated when full. No more relying on kill time of 8 seconds to find someone and form a strat. You can now pop this baby whenever you want and before your critical strategies on the spot. The reduced firing rate makes it have a nice DM battle with the SMG when the Crikey meter activates. The Cleaner Carbine does have more DM than the stock SMG, but only when you earn your Crikey meter, which ultimately makes this weapon balanced. Plus, it fills really fast, so you'll be getting mini crits out the ass if you're accurate enough. The Cozy Camper, like the Conch, now has a crit heal system. It acts exactly like the conch, where you can heal up to 4 HP a second and continues to keep the no flinching and damage vulnerability. This makes sense, since the sniper often gets flooded with scouts, soldiers, other snipers, and spies dealing damage to them, so you won't really be feeling the extra HP unless you're guarded by your team. It's a neat little way for the sniper to stay alive, and it counteracts with the damage penalty nicely, for a nice and balanced weapon. Then there's Jarate. Like the Mad Milk, reduces the cooldown time by 20% when extinguishing teammates. Again, it tries to help snipers be more of a team player, and it's pretty good when paired with the Huntsman, so you can do even more with Jarate. Last but not least, we have the Huntsman buff of shooting while in midair. Not much to note on that, as it doesn't affect much of the Huntsman's gameplay too much. Lots of secondary buffs this time around for the Aussie, even a Huntsman buff too. I wonder if that's to help make Sniper an even more viable class for Six's competitive matchmaking. Speaking of specific slot loadout changes, the Heavy got a lot of melee changes that seem rather odd. The Fist of Steel got rid of its deploy time and now has a holster time of 100%. That seems bad, especially when you need to get your minigun out this instant. But there is a bypass. Instead of switching from melee to primary, all you need to do is get in the habit of going from melee to secondary to primary really fast. Either by using the scroll wheel or by pressing 2-1 really fast, the Heavy actually gets a second faster of shooting rather than waiting for the whole holster time to be finished. Not really a nerf, it's actually a pretty neat buff, but it will take time to getting used to, so I think it's fairly a balanced weapon. The Gloves of Running Urgently got an increased holster time penalty too, but not as bad as the Fist of Steel though. But if you do the same thing as what I said before, you shouldn't be having a problem. The Warrior Spirit got some nice changes, and it now heals 50 health on kill now, and even removed the health penalty. However, you receive even more damage taken, and your health damage dealt are both 30%. This would be terrible if it wasn't for the fact that it's only when the weapon is active. You no longer need to fear about damage penalties or low health anymore. As long as you pull it out when you need to, this weapon is all dependent on you, meaning that it's now properly balanced. The Eviction Notice got a sweet speed bonus of 15%. That's half of the GRU without the mark for death, but your damage taken is increased by 20%. Again, this is all when it is active. If you can properly use this weapon, then this is great. You can choose between 3 things for speed now for the Heavy. The GRU for 30% extra speed, but have a mark for death when you get to a specific area. The Buffalo Steak Sandwich, which is a great 5 CP rollout strat for 25% speed. And now the Eviction Notice for 15% speed, but no negatives if you need to immediately put the weapon away. This is great when mixed in with the disciplinary action, making this weapon have a significant use and is a great balanced weapon. Heavy Melee is getting some serious reworkings done. Glad to see a majority of these actually having viable strats now. All these classes are getting some good buffs and nerfs to normalize everything to stock level, but what people can't quite understand are the nerfs that happened to the Engineer. The Engineer got a nerf taking off sappers, leaving their sentry unarmed for 0.5 seconds. This is only to make spies have a chance at destroying the sentry with their gun, so they don't need to constantly be disguised for sentry knockback and insta-kill. Before, spies would need to disguise constantly if an Engineer was hugging the hell out of the sentry. But now, if they sap it, they can take off their disguise and choose between their weapons in a lock-on-lock battle between Engineer and Spy. So it makes a lot of sense to me. And it's only half a second. That's like nothing. The Jag got a serious nerf of not being able to take off sappers in 2 hits. Now, you need 3 hits to take it off. But matched with the swing speed, it's only an extra 0.2 seconds of hitting your sentry. Is that really so bad? I think it's properly normalized, as before it would be really fast at taking sappers off by around half a second. Seems like a normal balance to me. As for the Rescue Ranger nerf, the bolt heal is reduced from 75 to 60, a whole 15 health lost. This would be significant if it took 5 bolts to heal a level 3 sentry completely, but it's still only 4. Before the update, you could heal an additional 94 HP from the whole clip more than the level 3 sentry's health. Now, you can only heal 34 HP more. Again, is that so bad? As long as it's not drastic to how many bolts you're firing, then it's not the end of the world. Valve just felt like you were getting a little too much out of the Wrangler X Rescue Ranger combo and just healing it with your gun rather than your wrench. This is only to balance the weapon in accordance with your wrench when it comes to repairs. It makes you feel like you're really earning the right to keep your level 3 alive, especially now that you can deploy it faster with the switch speed buff for every class. Engineer isn't really all bad. It's just a neat change of pace in what you need to be doing. If you want the other Jag nerfs to work out, like Repair, you're going to need to combine the Rescue Ranger with it in order to get the most out of each weapon. Now that that's settled, I think we need to talk about the Spy's buffs. The Dead Ringer's damage reduction when feigned was increased from 50 to 75%, meaning Spies can survive a lot more. This doesn't mean the resistance as a whole, only the amount of damage the first time you get hit. This way, Spies won't get obliterated the second they get hit with it. Because before, soldiers and snipers and point-blank scouts would be taking down over 60% of their health, making it tough for them to do proper strats, survive feign, and go looking for health packs rather than helping their team. Now that you get more resistance from the start, you can do a lot more, but it's still fair if you can predict where he's going. Makes it balanced and once again a viable watch for the Spy to use. As for the Spycicle, it was just a bunch of bug fixes. It was already balanced before with the Pyro, because all you needed to do was listen to the sound of the fizzle and predict the movements based on that. Glad the Spies got something nice for a change. A lot of nerfs in the past couple of months seemed to make me wonder if the class was ever going to get better. But now, we get to the good part. The class that got buffed the most. The Medic! I'm overjoyed to be talking about this since a bunch of people didn't think these buffs were fair for the Medic to have. Medics can essentially live longer by healing wounded teammates, upping their health regeneration in the process. I have felt that as of recently and have been dying a lot less. This is indeed a great buff. Is it fair? I think so. I mean, if he's wielding a metagun, why can't he get more health for himself, am I right? And during setup time, you build 3 times faster. So having a full team of demos is a valid strategy to essentially filling the spawn doors with crits. You now gain an additional bit of uber charge for healing your teammate with the Crusader's crossbow. I'm not exactly sure how much. I think it varies between 1 to 4 depending how much you heal. I mean, the Crusaders was already a nice tool, but this makes it even better. It doesn't change gameplay all that much, since you only really heal your teammates with the Crusaders once or twice around. But it's neat that they add that feature. It's not overpowered by any means, it just makes for a constant uber charge rate to happen without wasting time or giving the other team's medic a better chance at having uber first. Vaccinator got some stats switched around. You can no longer get health regeneration from having the proper resist, which is fair seeing as the medic gets buffed with health regen for healing wounded teammates anyway. Slight uber charge build on proper resist is perfect for making fast pushes. Uber charge rate increases and the overhealed uber charge rate decrease is lowered from 66 to 33%, so you're not to be stuck at a certain percentage forever. Makes for a better metagun, especially if you gain uber charge from selecting the right resist. I mean, the uber charge isn't really that effective most of the time, so buffing it to get more uber charges in really makes sense. This isn't invincibility we're talking about here. They want players who initially use the Vaccinator for uber sauce strats and popping on themselves to actually be healing players and making pushes. Good on them. As for the quick fix, it just got some bug fixes and you can't capture objectives with it like the rest of the overchargers, so not that big of a deal. Lastly, the Amputator now has the ability to ground uber charge through the healing taunt. You can essentially get up to 3 uber charge for every person you heal, but only when they're damaged. Makes sense and is a great cost strat for medics. They needed to buff this weapon, since the afterburn null effect on the weapon doesn't really matter anymore that the medic can stop afterburn through healing wounded patients now. It'd be rather useless otherwise. I find this to be fair. I mean, the medic isn't invulnerable when doing the taunt, and like the Crusaders, it doesn't waste time while the other medic gets free charge. This doesn't go anywhere different in my best and worst medic melee video, regardless of the changes in buffs. It would be higher if medics didn't get more health regen from healing people. I'm very happy with these medic changes because I love the medic, but enough about my class. I think it's time to focus on the class that got affected the most. The Demoman. Demoman got a shit ton of changes, especially the Demo Knight portion. The shield bash deals damage anywhere depending on range, and the crit on the sword when you charge has improved so that at 60% consumption, you can get your fill of pure crits. Nice! More crits for Demo Knights to make up for the nerfs they gave to the shields and swords. And charging gets rid of debuffs, so essentially all the shields now have afterburn, bleed, and soak immunity, but at the cost of a charge. That seems like a really fair stat. The charge removed fire immunity in exchange for the charge immunity to everything, and reduced its blast resistance by 10% to make it seem a little less overpowered when it comes to resistances. Very good changes and balance too. The Tide Turner gives mini crits on shield bashing, which doesn't affect too much honestly, since you should be timing your sword more than your shield. And reduce resistances to 15% to make up for its charge gain and turn abilities. It's still a really decent weapon. These nerfs just counteracts the goods to make it viable for quick attacking. The Tide Turner isn't for strong builds, but for swift builds and flanking, just the way it was made. I don't see any issue there, so I'm going to be moving on. The Splendid Screen removed the ability to deal charge impact anywhere, but since that was added to every shield anyways, that's not really a nerf. They add a recharge rate which increases by 50% on the shield, meaning you get more charge over time. An excellent counter to the Tide Turner's ability to gain charge with kill. And an increased blast resistance since the shield's resistances were kinda piss poor. This shield is an actually viable strategy now to get in the front lines quicker and resist more in 1v1 fights. I'm really loving these shield changes. It's like the soldier backpacks. Not one is better than the other necessarily. They're all viable depending on your style of play. Now onto the swords. All swords have increased melee range but slower deploy and holster speed to counteract the all-class switch speed. Essentially nothing changed. The speed is like the speed before the update, only a little bit slower. The Claymore no longer has its charge duration bonus since the shields were getting charged back fast one way or another. It now restores 25 health on kill, so it's the half Satoshi without the penalties. It removed health penalties, thank God, and increases damage taken by 15% when active. That's actually not bad. It's to teach Demo Knights that you need to have a grenade launcher with your set so that when you take damage, you can switch back fast and not feel the extra damage. That negative isn't that bad, and besides that, it got some pretty decent buffs. And if you have boots on, you have more health in all. Shouldn't affect too much anyways. Seems balanced to me. The Persian Persuader removed ammo pickups granting health instead of ammo. Nice. But you reduce primary and secondary ammo. That isn't so bad if you're a dedicated Demo Knight. I mean, who would use this weapon without a shield? You can replenish charge with ammo and gain charge meter on hit. This is great with the Charge and Targe, which doesn't grant charge in comparison to the other shields. You can now pick up ammo for your grenade launcher and in such fill up your meter charge? Hell yeah! This sword is for aggro Demo Knights that want to get in there and do some serious damage. Great changes to make this a pure Demo Knight sword to have, unlike the other swords where you can use them without a shield and it would still be a fine weapon. The Quickie Bomb Launcher increased the fizzle time from 2 seconds to 4, which is awesome since now you can lay traps for a little longer than usual. The Ullapool Caber got a melee damage buff, a fire rate penalty, and it now takes a while to pull out. The melee damage makes it so it's essentially a kill, if not super close, on 125 health classes. Switch to time penalty doesn't exactly matter if you're a caber jumping with it, since it's essentially a one-time use melee, and you should treat it that way. Neat to finally have the caber out of the slumps, and very viable to get that sick damage. Last but not least, the loose cannon received some changes as well. It now has reduced projectile speed, so that rapidly clicking is an option now. Reduce the cannonball impact damage by 10, so that double donking isn't as overpowered, and reduce knockback of the cannon hit, so it's basically the same as Air Blast now. I mean, 10 impact damage isn't exactly a huge change, and players won't go flying if you hit them with the cannonball, so double donking is actually more achievable. Projectile speed makes it so that you have to be a little closer, but that shouldn't be too bad since grenade launchers are supposed to be used up close. Wow, that's a lot of changes for the demo, almost as much as last year's Swissmas update. But now, it's the moment we've all been waiting for, the class we all want to talk about and has finally arrived. It's the Flame Master himself, Mr. Pyro! So a lot of people are kind of miffed about Pyro's nerfs and whatnot, and jumping to conclusion that this is the end of the world. Again, I will reiterate that we have to take off our pub goggles and focus more on the competitive side. The nerfs do make sense after we look at the bigger picture. Pyro can now gain 20 health back for extinguishing teammates. A nice little buff to exchange Air Blast for health while all in all helping your team. Consecutive Air Blasts don't get people stuck all that often anymore. They can air strafe now, yada yada. You can still Air Blast them in the corner and time Air Blast so that it doesn't affect too much in gameplay. And the Pyro's overall damage fall off spending on range has been decreased, meaning that the lowest amount of damage per tick at max range is increased. So it's like a damage buff. Nice little buffs here and there for the Pyro. Don't see much wrong or anything game changing. Now onto the weapons. The Degreaser got a nerf that was needed a long time ago. It no longer boosts all around switch speed, but instead the switch 2 speed of the degreaser is 5% less than it was before, and the switch from speed is 35% less. Add that in with the all-class switch speed and you actually get a buff switch to speed and a slightly less switch from speed. Flare punching can still happen, you just need to lower your flare gun ever so slightly instead of where you usually aim, since it comes out a quarter of a second slower. Is that devastating? Not really. You get a buff switch to speed now. That's still pretty nice. You remove the damage penalty, meaning you can experience the entirety of the Pyro's fall-off damage buff, but increase the air blast cost from 20 to 25. Wow! 2 less air blasts! What are we ever gonna do? Why would you need 10 air blasts? I don't think I've ever seen a Pyro use 10 whole air blasts in one go, unless it has to stop Uber. But even then, it was more like 5 air blasts. You ultimately don't need 10 air blasts, and 8 is still a perfectly good number to go with, and an increased afterburn penalty from 25% to 66%. So instead of 2 afterburn damage per tick before, you now get 1 afterburn damage per tick. A whole 20 damage less? Again, not so devastating in comparison to the damage penalty removal. Valve knows that we love to use the degreaser for secondary and melee combinations. It gives the Pyro more time to execute those combinations, and to make up for that 20 extra damage, you can just do insane damage with your secondary anyway, which again, is not really a fall off. The degreaser really isn't that bad and definitely needed a reworking since it was overall overpowered. But now it kind of feels balanced to react to combination weapon play, and the switch speed doesn't really seem noticeable. Pyros don't like change, I guess. The degreaser is still a really fantastic weapon. Now on to the flog. I bet you guys can't wait for me to rant about this one, don't you? How it's so overpowered and nobody can destroy the Pyros now. Oh man, check out its overpowered buffs, guys. Remove the 10% damage penalty. Oh my god, that's terrible. You now have 0.68 damage more. Oh my god, that's so much changing. And when the Pyro activates his oomph taunt, he becomes invulnerable to knockback and has an uber effect. It's the end of the world, guys. Invincible Pyros, oh my god. I am so mad. I'm gonna write Valve a letter and say that they should ban the flog from competitive. Alright, enough of the jokes. It seems like the flog isn't really that devastating. I mean, you still need to succumb to getting 2 kills worth of oomph to actually get it. You still actually have to earn it. And without air blasts, soldiers and demos can easily counter you. Hell, even heavies, snipers, medics, and engineers can counter the flog Pyro. The only classes that would really be feeding the Pyro would be the scout, spy, and potentially another Pyro. So if you're a spy, don't get close to these Pyros. Let the big boys handle it. If you're a scout, use your speed to be nowhere close to him and even help him out by getting that charge. Play the distance game and use your pistol. And Pyros, you need to understand that the flog isn't worth challenging. You can fill the flog's meter with flare gun afterburn, that's for sure, but not really all that much. And when he pops his taunt, you have many options. Simply back up immediately and shoot backwards, sticky under his feet so that when the taunt is done he dies, use ranged weapons to take him down. I mean, it's only good at close range. And the oomph doesn't last that long. Maybe a whole 6 seconds? I think you guys can survive for 6 seconds, can you not? As fast as the Pyro gains oomph is how fast you lose oomph when you activate it. It's properly balanced to get what you deserve. Many classes before the buffs would knock back the Pyro when he did the taunt and get damage advantage before he could wreak havoc. As much as you earned the oomph, you just got easily countered. So now, instead of cheap-shotting his taunt, we have to earn the kill by waiting for him to finish, and then we can continue. That's only fair. And besides, his Uber should be a shining symbol of getting the hell out of there. If a medic popped on a heavy, wouldn't you be clear out of their way too? Just do the same for flogs and everything should be fine. Again, in pubs, many people aren't the brightest and do stupid stuff like feeding the Pyro, so it doesn't seem like he's earning it, but in matchmaking sense, where you coordinate as a team, nobody's going to be stupidly feeding the Pyro, and when he pops, the communication is to get out and everyone is already long gone. So for pubs, it does seem overpowered because of free chicken feed, but otherwise, not really. Alright, now we have the Extinguisher. Poor Extinguisher. Its properties got changed. Now you get a 100% chance to crit burning players. Seems pretty righteous to me. It has a 33% damage penalty, and if you do the math, 33% of 195 is 129 damage. You can still kill 150 health classes if you counted the pre-fire damage included. A 20% slower attack speed, which is not really that bad since your swing speed is already fast and it acts like an uber saw, and we all know many people still use that. But the devastating part about the extinguisher is that it has 75% slower switch 2 speed. Ouch. Well, not really. Take into consideration the all-class switch speed. So instead of a minus 75% switch 2 speed, it's more like a minus 65%. Add in the degreaser for a plus 30% switch 2 speed, which again, degreaser is used for combination weapon play, so it makes sense for the extinguisher to have this nerf, and you get a minus 35% switch 2 speed. Minus 35% switch 2 speed isn't that bad when you take into consideration how long the person's in the air after an air blast. This is still a pretty good weapon and overall just requires the degreaser to shine. We all know how the degreaser isn't bad, so don't be scared, it won't bite. As the airstrike is to the base jumper, the extinguisher is to the degreaser. Seems perfectly balanced to me, seeing as if you want to get in huge crit damage, you really need to earn it. For those asking if the nerfs on the extinguisher makes a change on my best and worst pyro melee list, it doesn't change one bit. It's still a fantastic weapon, you just need to learn how to use the switch 2 speed properly. Pyro doesn't look bad when you take a step back to fully appreciate what Valve is doing in coordination to what we were already doing in the first place. The next time an update just comes out, don't freak out over the changes, because you might just come to appreciate them later on. And this has been the entirety of the class and weapon changes in the Tough Break update. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Remember to be awesome, stay awesome, and to have an awesome day. I'm Rob the Awesome, and I'll see you guys later. Ciao for now.
Motherfucker, I'm awesome. No, you're not, dude. Don't lie. I'm awesome. I'm driving around in my mom's ride. I'm awesome. A quarter